We dive into our final full game preview of the 2022 regular season as the Baltimore Ravens prepare to take on the Cincinnati Bengals. All that and more in today's episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for being here with us today, tuning in, making us your first listen today, free and available always on all platforms, including over on YouTube. So on audio form, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, be sure to hit that follow button. On YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the like button on this video as well. We are daily, so same show, both audio and video form, 5 days per week, Monday through Friday. So if you want Ravens news or analysis or updates or more, we have it here for you, both audio and video. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline used to cover this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And we're back here. We're going to be doing our final regular season game preview, full game preview for the Ravens as they prepare to take on the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 18 with Qadry Ismail, who obviously former Baltimore Raven and a Super Bowl champion. So we'll get his insight into everything, into seeding, into on-the-field stuff for Baltimore, into actually the Damar Hamlin situation itself and his thoughts on that as well. So without any further ado, let's dive into our full game preview and more with Qadry Ismail. Here with me on this Purple Friday, as always, to break down now what is the last regular season game for the Ravens of 2022. It's former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver with the Super Bowl champion on the side. It's Qadry Ismail. And Q, it's been such a crazy, wild week with everything that happened in that Bengals and Bills game with Damar Hamlin. And obviously, first and foremost, the person Damar Hamlin is the most important part of that, but it has impacted the NFL in so many different ways here. And we have some breaking news, at least at the time we're recording the show, to talk about in terms of scheduling and seeding and what it all means actually on the field and in terms of all that.
I am trying to literally decipher what has been going to be Roger Goodell's reply to what you're saying. It's an extremely difficult situation with Damar Hamlin. And yes, the human side of it all. And what I am hoping and praying for Damar is that he is in a good space and that the healing that, the reports from the doctors saying that, he is steadily improving. It continues to help him towards that full recovery. But with all that said, yes, the, final game of the regular season is going to come about. And based upon the Ravens either winning or losing that game, and then that kind of sets a path towards pretty much a seeding in the playoffs. And in the playoffs, there could be a scenario where there is teams that will have played more games than another opponent, and therefore it could be some inequities. And therefore, Roger Goodell is trying to mitigate such things, and he has put a proposal together that would be going to the owners, and they're going to break it down, and I'm sure somebody's going to decipher it because mother of pearl. I'm sitting here trying to really fully grasp it, and I get some of the basic concepts of it. You're just trying to make sure that no team has a competitive disadvantage, and the playoffs, yes, every team is feeling like they had a fair shot, especially when it comes to, a home game versus an away game. And if it's, in fact, an AFC championship game, whether or not you're hosting it or whether or not you have to travel on the road for it.
Right. And these are such, uncharted waters, both on and off the field for the NFL, where you have to kind of learn as you go. So right before we started recording this, the tweet coming out where the Bengals and the Bills game will not be resumed or to be declared a no contest. So it does not count for either team, meaning that both Cincinnati and Buffalo will have 16 game seasons. The rest of the NFL will have 17 game seasons. And so that by default, the Bengals win the North off of that. because what had to happen for Baltimore to win the North after their loss to Pittsburgh was Cincinnati had to lose both games. They couldn't tie one of them. They couldn't win one of them. The Bengals are the AFC North champions, but in a proposal that the league has put together, the owners are going to get together and decide on it. The Ravens could still host a home playoff game, and they actually still have something to play for in week 8. Well, multiple things in week 18. So what has to happen is the Ravens could host this home playoff game in week 18 if the Ravens beat the Bengals and the Ravens and the Bengals are scheduled to match up in the playoffs. So if the Bengals are the 3 seed and the Ravens are the 6 seed, since the Ravens would have 2 wins over Cincinnati, then that game slate would be determined by a coin flip. But if the Ravens and Bengals aren't scheduled to match up, or if the Bengals just outright win and the 2 teams play, then that's just regular scheduling procedure, and the game gets played in Cincinnati because that's what would have happened anyway. So I know there were some conversations about should the Ravens rest their starters? Does it matter if they're the 5 or the 6 seed? Now, Q, you have a situation where Baltimore, if they win, could potentially be playing for a home playoff game.
Yeah, and I mean, that would be fantastic. Although I will say from an odds aspect of things, it really in the last few playoff times, going back some seasons, it really hasn't been that much of a tactical advantage to play at home. But that being said, yeah, home cooking compared to going on the road, you would definitely like that, especially if it's a close game because you're familiar special teams wise with the wins and all the things and kicking the ball and all that, and then just one less layer of travel and worry that you got to worry about going on the road. All that being said, the fact that yes, there is more to play for, it sweetens the pot a little bit more for this Ravens ball club.
And I think before this whole thing came out, and obviously we're going to see if it all gets passed and if it all becomes official, this right now, I believe, is just proposed. But at the same time, if the Ravens were to beat the Bengals, if the Chargers win, they're automatically 6 because the Chargers play the Broncos. The only way the Ravens can move up to 5 is if the Ravens win and the Chargers lose. Then the Ravens go to 5 and they play whoever wins the AFC South, so either Jacksonville or Tennessee. But if the Ravens win and the Chargers win, the Ravens are 6. If the Ravens lose, they're locked into 6, regardless of if the Chargers lose or not. So I know people, we've talked about a few people are talking about, who would you rather play? But in this circumstance, would you rather have your pick of an opponent in terms of, playing a Jacksonville or a Tennessee? So I guess I'll phrase it this way. Would you rather play Jacksonville or Tennessee on the road, or would you rather have an opportunity to play Cincinnati at home?
Whew, I mean, that's a tough one because, just football wise, on paper, I would say I take my chances with Tennessee. You got a quarterback who doesn't have much experience in Dobbs. Although their defense is, pretty good. They've kind of been leaking a lot of oil lately. Then if you look at what Jacksonville is about, you make more plays than them, then you pretty much beat them in the regular season. You didn't. They actually have a really good offense. They got some really fine receivers to go with what Lawrence can bring to the table as a quarterback, and the fact that their defense is very opportunistic, and they make some plays. But both teams are I think more than beatable compared to playing up against the Bengals, who yes is your division opponent, but they clearly have from a loaded deck with all of the weapons from T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Mixon, all of it. Joe Burrow is just, he can sling the ball around. Heck, even throw in Hayden Hurst. I just think that overall, for my liking, as much as it would be cool to see a Ravens home game, boy, go on the road and do your thing. Do your thing, meaning play either Jacksonville or Tennessee.
And the Ravens went on the road against Tennessee a couple years ago and won that playoff game. And they obviously lost to Buffalo the next week, but they did it. And that was Lamar's first playoff win. So if Lamar is able to return for the playoffs. Maybe you can send him back to Tennessee. You can have him do the job again because obviously you know what he brings you. But in terms of the whole incident and kind of the aftermath, can you kind of go through your emotions and everything? Because I know in your playing days or even just your career, both on and off the field, have you seen anything of like what we saw on the field on Monday night?
You know, I saw it was the Lions player. I forget his name, where he got paralyzed, and but he was coming off the field. They strapped him on a stretcher, and he had the thumbs up kind of thing, and it was like, oh my gosh, and that was devastating to see and witness, because I was obviously an active player, and you're like, man, what was that all about? The one young man back then was it Mississippi, I believe, or Mississippi State? The receiver, or no, defensive back, actually. I'm sorry, and he was running. Boom! He hit the receiver, I think, with the crown of his head, and he just went limp. And he suffered paralysis, and they had to really be overly careful because he could have died right there on the field, and they saved his life. I myself, ironically enough, in the Buffalo Bills game when I was an active player, the hardest hit that I took as a receiver, college or pro, heck, you can go back to high school, was I received a blow to my chest, and I was on the ground, and I mean I'm rolling around. Hallelujah that I was rolling around, looking on the scenario with Hamlin. But yeah, I felt like heart wise, and I mean I'm kind of got a little wry smile on my face because I think that's like some kind of a response just to even after all these years of being retired. Oh yeah, I was tough. Anyway, no, I wasn't tough. It had nothing to do with toughness. It's like, holy smokes, you got blew up. And it was a scenario where, looking back on it, my competitive juices, I go in the locker room, I remember the doctor testing me and making sure, everything was okay. As far as punctured lung, as far as, heart palpitations and all the things. And I actually went back in the game and made a crucial play to help us win the game. But, you know, I say all of that like I those are some of the worst moments. I know I've received many a concussion and all that. And those are some of the worst moments. Never seen where actually CPR though was utilized to revive an individual on the playing field. I've seen where guys, real dear um, friend, former Minnesota Viking Corey Stringer, he died during training camp. It wasn't a live game and all that, but had a heat stroke and passed. And so I've seen a lot, but this is really in this scenario, Monday Night Football. Everybody is watching, the whole country. Plus, you got your colleagues out there and all that watching as well. But to see that in that kind of respect, it hit different. And yeah, it was humbling to see. And as a father who has a son still playing, yeah, that thought ran through my mind. But at the same time, I also know that it's the inherent risk involved. And the thing is, he was playing the game at full speed, and it was a routine hit. That's what was so weird about it. But I guess apparently, the heartbeat and the hit, when it collided, that energetic impact plus the way the heart rhythm goes electrically was like a short circuit, if you will. So went to cardiac arrest. That was interesting. So yeah. I am looking at what was it, close to now $6 million in giving to his charity in his hometown. And I heard, I guess the running report was saying it was his charity, but it was also tied to his mom's daycare center, and raising funds and awareness for the kids involved there, and it was like $2,500, and now close to $6 million. And what gets me is that, man, I mean, that's Bills Mafia. I know started it off. We saw it when they did it with Andy Dalton, when Andy Dalton knocked out the Ravens. Like my I don't really even know how to put into words how, like, the gratitude I have for Bills Mafia, who I'm telling you, I know those people just, like, giving hearts, like, and I know others have as well. I'm absolutely not minimizing their hearts of giving as well, but I know the tone was set. Like, your team made the playoffs and you donated money to Andy Dalton. Like, I know they started off this, like, how can we show our love, and they put their treasure and their hearts in the right area, for the Hamlin family. And I mean, I'm just like, wow, like, that to me is just humbling as all get out. And I have an immense amount more respect for the Bills fan base than any other fan base that I've ever seen in my life.
I think we saw a united front from so many people when it happened. Of course, the thoughts and the prayers and the donations and everything to really unite around, again, this 24-year-old young man who has done so much. And I think one of the parts of this that is going, well, it's not going unnoticed, because a lot of people now are realizing the man that he is and how much of a community giver he is, how much of a great person and a bright light that he is. So we got some positive updates yesterday for Damar Hamlin. So hopefully, again, he's able to pull through this, because, again, what matters the most is Damar Hamlin as a person, and then everything else obviously is secondary. But here we're going to transition into football in the second segment. We'll be diving into what this Ravens and Bengals game on the field will bring for both teams. We'll start with the Ravens offense against the Cincinnati defense. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a lot to talk about on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, and I am fully into fantasy basketball now, still undefeated in that. But if you want a different twist on fantasy, be sure to check out PrizePicks. And PrizePicks, you have a ton of current entries you can have. They also have super easy games and format that you can use. And how it works is to pick 2 to 5 players. And if they will go score more or less in their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times money in an entry. There's no competing against other people, so it's UBurst rejection available. PrizePicks offers rejections on any sport that you watch, including the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, you have NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, and so many more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app, go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time user can receive $100 instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to the promo code Locked On to sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. We return our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Qadry Ismail and Q. For the Ravens and the Bengals, this is a big divisional matchup. Again, the owner's vote that will be voted on tomorrow is apparently if the Ravens do end up beating the Bengals and they have higher winning percentages and the Ravens have those 2 wins, a coin flip for a home field advantage, at least in the first round, the home playoff game. But you obviously first have to go out and you have to win the game. So for the Ravens, obviously we've been talking about it for weeks. The quarterback situation in Baltimore does not look like Lamar is going to be able to suit up again in this one. He's missed 2 days of practice as we record this here. Tyler Huntley, though, there's another wrinkle, because he has been limited and during the media availability hasn't thrown passes. We've seen Anthony Brown out there. So this could really be Anthony Brown's first start of his NFL career. Came in against Pittsburgh, and I thought did a pretty good job, all things considered, mistake-free football, made a couple big throws. But in your confidence level, Q, how confident would you be in Anthony Brown going into the jungle in Cincinnati and being able to lead this offense to a victory against what is a very high-powered, not only Bengals offense, but a defense that I think has been playing better over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean, that is going to be a monumental task. The thing that, he would have in his favor, if you will, is the fact that there's not a lot of film on him. I go back to, when Tyler was playing against, the Chicago Bears, and obviously, he pulls out the victory. And one thing that I noticed, early on, there was some timing routes and such that were to Rashad Bateman, that were to Mark Andrews, and he missed on some of those throws, and other times he kind of hesitantly held on to the ball. Second half comes, they adjusted a little bit, they give him some more opportunities. He takes advantage of it. Clearly, final moments of the game, he showed a lot of poise, and boy, you saw him against All Out Blitz, and he hits a beautiful ball down the football field. Was it Sammy Watkins? I think it was Sammy Watkins who made the play, and they wound up winning the game. Fast forward a couple of games later, teams started figuring them out. Defensive coordinators started figuring them out, and unfortunately, they don't come up with victories. On the outside looking in, this time around, we're like, all right, cool. I sent out a tweet after the first play that he's in, like, all right, I see a deep comeback route. He throws it to the sideline. I believe it was Duvernay. Boom, he catches it. And I was like, all right, he has command of the offense. That took on a life of its own in that tweet. But I say all that to say, I was saying, like, all right, cool. He seems to have, in one of the hardest throws and one of the hardest moments, he seems to have settled down. He seems like, all right, cool. You know what? The game's not too big. Cool. As we've seen his body of work, again, in this time frame that Lamar has not been in there, we've seen where, we've seen like an up and down kind of a thing where he's missed some wide open guys because, as opposed to sitting in the pocket and going through his progression, he sees the first read and he goes right off of it and he goes to the next guy. We'll see where, Greg Roman and his inconsistent play calling doesn't seem like he's really given Tyler a chance to kind of develop a rhythm. We'll see a lot of passes. We'll see a lot of runs, but you don't really see a good run that sets up a pass or a pass that can set up a run. You don't see the continuity of it all. You see the red zone, the inefficiencies in the red zone, and you're like, okay, that you're not helping this guy out at all. See a smattering of play calling that was good. Sure, the Isaiah Likely hitting them in the flat, the way they designed it, I was like, all right, cool. You see Demarcus Robinson, the way they designed his touchdown in the red zone. All right, cool. So there's some really, really bad, and then there's some good, more bad than good. You're seeing teams just figure him out. And so he has to take the next step and be in a position where he can say, yeah, you thought you knew my chess move. Here's the other piece that you haven't figured out. That's where his challenge is going to be. It could be a moot point, like you're saying, if Brown is in the game. And if he is, then the chessboard moves, if you will, because you don't know what he's going to bring as far as under pressure, as far as third down throws. What are some of the things that we see from him that maybe a coordinator might put into play, whether it be zone or whether or not they say, he can't handle a blitz look pressure, so we're going to go ahead. Or maybe he can stand tall in the blitz look pressure, and now all of a sudden he's slinging it down the field. We don't know all those things. We've seen it so many times from other quarterbacks that really hadn't had, a full book on them, and that full book gives the coordinator an advantage, gives the defensive guys an advantage. We don't know. And so I'm saying that if it is Tyler's going to have to step up his game and show he has another piece or another card up his sleeve, to use that cliche. If it is Brown, we just hope that he has enough poise and that whatever they bring to figure him out, he takes advantage of it. If it's zone, takes advantage of it. If it's pressure looks, man-to-man on the outside, takes advantage of it.
Right. And look, we saw some promising things in the preseason. Now, I will say the preseason versus week 18 in a very big situation, it's very, very different. Stakes are much higher. The game counts, and you got your first stringers in there. This Bengals defense right now, a top 10 unit against the run. They're 9th in the NFL. Pass defense, they're 19th, so kind of more in the middle there. But I think a big thing for me is what are we going to see usage-wise? I know there were a lot of, I guess I'll say, questionable usage decisions by this Ravens team. Gus Edwards being the number one usage decision, where he only gets 3 carries for 2 yards. John Harbaugh admits, they probably should have used Gus a little more. And then Greg Roman talked a bit about it. yesterday, but also I think wide receiver usage, where Mark Andrews, look, big bounce back game for Mark Andrews against Pittsburgh, 9 for 100. But then the next closest pass catcher was Isaiah Likely with 3 for 12. So 100 versus 12 for your 1 and 2 guys. And then below that are the 2 wide receivers. You have 1 catch, 9 yards to Marcus Robinson, 1 catch, 9 yards for Deshaun Jackson. So Q, what do you want to see running back usage wise and wide receiver usage wise against Cincinnati?
So running back is your bread and butter, and it's such a cool back and forth with Gus Edwards and what he brings to the table with his physicality, and J.K. Dobbins, what he brings with, I think, his toughness, elusiveness, and speed. Not saying that if a guy has a hot hand, you don't want to take him out, but at least give a chance to have the 1-2 punch. It's going to help your quarterback. If your quarterback is dominating the ball by throwing it a lot, or by even having him do some QB counters, which is something that they run an awful lot of, or I like to call it the double G power, where you got the guard and tackle pulling. I just think that you need to have some level of continuity with your studs, and that's both JK and Gus Bus. Now, receiver wise, we all know, and this is not a knock, it's just what it is. They're not a receiver centric offense. So you got to eat when you got to eat. In other words, when the ball comes your way, bro, you better hope and pray that you can make the play. And that might give you an opportunity for another play, but there's no guarantee. Yes, I just think it's also on Tyler to go through his progression. I think he gets off of the first guy so quickly, then it's just running. And that happened a couple of times where, if you just play with poise, you can get the ball out to your different guys. There were a couple of times where, goodness, some of his decision making, I was like, bro, what are you doing? You're gonna throw an interception. Clearly, he threw one to Minka Fitzpatrick, and it's like, bruh, what were you doing? And he really, you could see where he just was guessing, and that really, to me, makes me concerned, big time.
And there's a lot that goes into this offense. And you're right. We've talked about it. This is a tight end centric offense, not a wide receiver or passing offense, not a wide receiver centric passing offense. So I think you got to go with your bread and butter, which is the ground game. And I think a big matchup I'm watching is DJ Reader, who did not play in that first matchup. He's one of the best defensive tackles in this league. Has been one of the best defensive tackles this year. Going up against Tyler Linderbaum and Kevin Zeitler in that interior, to see if the Ravens can get something going on the ground early. But we'll see if the Ravens also can stop Cincinnati's ground game and force them to air the ball out, which they air the ball out pretty well over there in Cincinnati on offense. So coming up, we'll be diving in to this Ravens defense going up against Joe Burrow in that Bengals offense. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a lot to dive into here on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline, and BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, news, stats, analysis, and so much more. You can get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football, college bowl season, you have basketball as well. They've got it all over BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They've always got the fastest and easiest ways to get your betting info. So whatever the website today, or use a mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here rounding out Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher and Qadry Ismail still talking with you here. And Q, I kind of teased it, but look, this Ravens defense, top 3 rushing defense right now. The Bengals rushing offense has not been good this year from a numbers perspective. They're 29th in the NFL in terms of yards per attempt. Now, the issue is that even if you stop the Bengals ground game, you still have to deal with Joe Burrow. Still have to deal with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. So let's just start off with the Bengals pass offense first. We know who Marlon Humphrey is. We know he's had a great year this year. But if you're Baltimore, you're hopeful you get back Marcus Peters. But are you confident in the secondary that also includes Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams on the back end, and Chuck Clark and even a Brandon Stevens? Are you confident in those guys going toe-to-toe with that big 3 wide receiver core?
Yes and no. Yes, I think Marlon, but no, everyone else. I think Kyle Hamilton, to a lesser degree. I think he is showing himself he can play at the line. Holy wow. And that dude is really amazing. And them long arms, he's the long arm of the law. Marcus Williams, bruh, is you don't really see. I don't know. I'm trying to think. We haven't really seen anybody test him because they know. Well, we know they tested him in Pittsburgh and they paid for it, and we didn't see anybody test him again. That dude has everyone saying we ain't throwing it deep. Think about it, like outside throws when it's man to man on the outside. Pickens, um, that dude is a phenom and made one of the best corners in the league, and Marlon Humphreys look silly on the outside. So as far as the inside deep ball, we're good. I think as far as the outside and Marlon, and I think Marlon's going to be up for the task as far as who's who in the zoo because of Jamar Chase chased him to that 200 biller off the first go round with them. I think he is going to be locked in. I think Marcus Peters is a roll of the dice and seeing how well he feels subconsciously with the way his knee holds up. You'll say, well, Qadry is calf. Yeah, well, I know a little bit about training, and I know also this that the calf is related to that knee issue and the way in which the muscle inhibition is going about. He isn't as fully confident in the cutting, moving, and really getting after it with that knee. So, calf knee issue is going to be tested by all them dudes Higgins, Boyd, and Chase. Don't even get me started as far as there were some really good opportunities Hayden Hurst had, and I'm just hoping that the bad game that the middle linebackers had, we've been praising them in Queen and Roquan, but man, they're gonna have their hands full again, and we got to see better. There were just too many catches, and Najee Harris making a phenomenal catch to win the game, unfortunately. But we got to see better. They are a better duo. We got to see better. So all around, passing advantage is to the Bengals.
And I know I talked about how the Bengals didn't have DJ Reader in their first matchup, but the Ravens didn't have Roquan Smith in theirs. And I think people do forget in that first Cincinnati game, the Ravens defense stifled the Bengals early on. Now, the Bengals put up 10 points in the second quarter, but early it just felt like Joe Burrow wasn't in a rhythm, and then he found that rhythm a little bit as the game went on. So, Q, what does Roquan Smith do for this Ravens defense against a team like that? Even if he limits a guy like a Hayden Hurst or a Joe Mixon out of the backfield and then has to have Joe Burrow go elsewhere and almost eliminate one of those other pass-catching options, or at least the secondary pass-catching options.
Well, I mean, the fact is that they're all explosive. So, you move Jamar Chase around and put him in some really good positions. You go ahead and have Higgins on the same side and motion him from in to out. Now it changes up who is on who. The point I'm making is that you can get creative, and I think, Coach Taylor, Zach Taylor, is really good at putting guys in position to make plays. And I think Joe Burrow is good enough to look off, the robber in the middle and Marcus Williams. He's that talented. So, I mean, are we getting Calais back? Are we going to see a revitalized Justin Houston? Or are we, going to see Jason Pierre-Paul play so well that we're going to see long arm of the law come off the edge off of a blitz. We're going to see pressure. I mean, that's what, I think Pittsburgh looked really good because you couldn't get to Pickett. You got to get to Burrow. That's the bottom line. You get to a quarterback, throw him off his rhythm, then, yeah, it's not that big of a deal when it comes to who's playing who as far as who's matching up on what when the quarterback's on the ground because – there is that pressure.
We've kind of seen over the past couple of weeks, there hasn't been as much pressure as we definitely saw it early in the year. Justin Houston was on a tear to start the season, but I think now, we haven't seen Rafael for most of the year. He's had a couple of plays later, but it just hasn't been enough from him. I mean, Tyus Bowser, I think, has made some sort of an impact, but not really on the stat sheet. Exactly. It's kind of, we saw the early returns and then it's kind of definitely tapered off. But Hugh, in terms of predictions, here's where I am with the whole thing. We've talked about the red zone offense and how, frankly, bad it's been for the Ravens this year. they've gotten away with some wins because the offenses they've played and with how good the defense has been playing, they've been allowed by the defense to get away with trading some touchdowns for field goals. Against Cincinnati, you're not going to be allowed to do that. With the way this offense has played, you have to punch the ball in and score touchdowns. If you kick field goals in the red zone, the Bengals will make you pay. So with that in mind, and with everything else we talked about in this show, how do you feel this one goes?
If I'm looking at it with just my football eye, taking off my Ravens purple shaded glasses, this is a Bengals-inspired win. And I think it's 35-14. We need to see red zone just be explosive. And if you ain't got it fixed now, you ain't going to have it fixed. We need to see more than the Mark Andrews. And at the same time, if you don't have that chemistry, well, week 18, you ain't going to have it. We need to see Lamar Jackson be under center for quarterback. Well, what we've seen is he ain't back in that PCL. He ain't ready. We know the defense can play, but we haven't seen them stop a team in 4-minute offense going into the half or 4-minute offense going to finish off a game. That being said, 35-14.
Yeah, I feel this is a game where I need to see it from the offense before I can confidently say, hey, they can beat a team like Cincinnati. Now, I think that if Lamar was to play in this one, I think they could have possibly pulled it off. I think that Lamar gives you that. And does Lamar fix everything wrong with this offense right now? No. He helps, but there are other underlying issues besides not having Lamar Jackson. Now, I think that I probably would have picked the Ravens to win like a close game if they had Lamar, but it's not looking like he plays. We haven't seen it from the offense even since the bye week when Lamar was in there. If the Ravens show me something this week on offense where they punch the ball in the red zone a bunch and they're able to move the ball effectively and we see good play calling situationally, hey, maybe they can go into Cincinnati, or maybe it's a home playoff game. Maybe they go into the wild card round, and that's that's the confidence, that's the momentum they would need. But right now, they just have been so ineffective for the most part. I mean, I think the best offense we've seen from them out of the bye week was that fourth quarter in Jacksonville. And it's almost like you have to have one or the other. With the Ravens, is either the offense is doing well and the defense isn't. The defense is doing well and the offense isn't, because in that fourth quarter, the defense just collapsed and the Ravens lost that Jacksonville game. So I'm going to say that this is a 24-17 Bengals win. I think the defense will be able to not let the Bengals put up 40. But at the same time, this is by far the most talented offense the Ravens have seen out of the bye week. And while the defense has stepped up to the task, I think in a way they will still do that on Sunday against the Bengals. But I just have to see it first from the offense before I can confidently say, yeah, the Ravens can go toe-to-toe with these top AFC teams, something that the Bengals right now, with the way they're playing on offense, and again, so much unknown with just how these teams are going to be mentally coming off of what happened on Monday night, especially the Bengals, who, again, it happened in their stadium. But for now, I am going to say 24-17 Bengals without Lamar. I'll give it 20-19 Ravens with Lamar, but I just don't think we're going to see Lamar in this game based off of what we've seen so far through Thursday. But that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for hopping on. When we get back next week, we know the Ravens are in to the playoffs. We just don't know when and where they'll be playing yet. Hopefully for the Ravens, they're able to win against Cincinnati. I want them to win. I want them to do it, and I want them to get that momentum. But again, we'll see what happens.
We'll see. There's a lot to look at and examine, and you're playing a good team, a playoff team. So there's nothing like getting playoff ready than playing against a really good team to end off the year. The Bengals are just that, and we'll see how it all unfolds.
A big shout out to Q for hopping on here, talking with me about the Ravens, his experiences, his insights, and everything. Always great conversations with Q. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here on Monday, we'll be diving into everything that happened in that Ravens and Bengals Week 18 game, and also previewing a bit of the playoffs for Baltimore. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here on Monday.